The presentation for the next, let's say, 50 to 55 minutes is going to be the roadmap of SLES for SAP Applications. If you have any questions, just raise your arm, ask the question right away. I'm happy to answer that. The presentation itself will be 3 marketing slides on what the product is, just in case someone doesn't know what SLES for SAP Applications specifically is. So 3 slides marketing what the product is. We will then look into what is new with Service Pack 2, which has just been released. I'm not talking about the specific SLES features, but the features that SLES for SAP Applications will bring with it. And then I close with an outlook about what comes next, or where I think is an interesting topic for you to know about what we are going to tackle after Service Pack 2. Some words on myself. My name is Hannes Kühnemund. I'm with SUSE for 2 years now. Responsibilities in product management for SLES for SAP Applications, live patching, as well as a few technology components like YAST, Snapper, and the SuperStack, for example. Before being with SUSE, I was 14 years with SAP, and I think this is why they hired me for this job as a product manager. So 3 marketing slides, please excuse that. So 3 marketing slides on the product. So we have SUSE Linux Enterprise Server. That's an operating system. It's the preferred choice for SAP HANA, and 95% of the customers use either SLES or SLES for SAP Applications to let HANA run on. It has been the first Linux distribution to be supported for SAP HANA on x86-64 servers, and currently the only Linux for SAP HANA on IBM Power systems. So moving forward, SLES for SAP Applications, and please excuse me, that's all marketing talk. Of course, you can boost the performance, reduce downtime, and minimize time and effort. This is just too high level, I guess, for you, because, I mean, you want to see what features are in there, you run the stuff, you need to know what actually is really in there. So let me skip that right away. This picture gives you a better overview of what SLES for SAP Applications is as a product. It includes SLES. So you have basically SLES included, the base operating system. We have high availability included. So our high availability extension, which is usually a separate extension on the prices, is included in the product. We have a couple of dedicated SAP features on top, and those are just 4 picks that we have. And actually in the presentation you will see much more, which we now introduce with SP2. Page cache management is one of the features that when you run a backup, for example, on your SAP system, and then the file system cache, because backup is operating on the file system, reads a lot of file system cache, and the file system cache is read into memory, and the SAP application memory is swapped out. And after the backup, you would like to have the SAP memory actually back in memory, but it takes a while because it needs to read all the memory. With page cache management, we have a switch. Basically, it's a barrier. You can configure that the page cache isn't allowed to grow over a certain threshold, so that the SAP memory usually stays in memory. The installation wizard is a feature that is mainly used by our B1 partner, so SAP Business One. It allows you to wrap an SAP installation of either SAP Inst or SWPM and let it install with just providing 3 or 4 parameters. When you all know that the SAP installation media, and you have to configure in the menu lots of stuff, and afterwards they ask you to read the installation manual, which is 700 pages to do configurations here and there. Those changes can be done automatically, and the installation wizard is taking care of that. It cannot install all the products. I mean, if you want to install ECC 5, that's not going to happen. That's way too old. So we're starting with NetWeaver 730 and onward can be installed. HANA Firewall is an extension to our SUSE Firewall package. I mean, if you are familiar with IP tables and really like doing IP tables on the command line, go ahead. Nobody will understand basically what you did, or only a few people. And HANA Firewall is actually something that will help administrators to quickly configure a firewall. So the SUSE Firewall can only cope with 3 different network zones. But HANA, if run in a cluster, you need 9 network zones. So what we do is we have an extension for SUSE Firewall that allows you to run 9 network zones. And actually, it's reading the SAP profile parameters and actually setting the ports and the interfaces correctly already with the wizard. A couple of HANA resource agents, which make the failover detection and failover automation a little easier. I come to that later. We have a specific update channel. a special repository which allows us to override packages and configurations delivered to SLES. Because SLES is a general purpose operating system. It has some kernel parameters which are very cool for SendMail and Apache, but maybe not for SAP HANA. So we have a channel where we can override packages and configurations for SAP-specific things. We have overlapping support between service packs of 18 months. Regular SLES has only 6 months. So 18 months support overlap. And even sometimes this is not enough because SAP installations tend to be very, I try to find a nice word here, but you don't do the most current things with your SAP installation. It powers your business. It needs to be stable. And on top, we have the priority support. But let's stop here. So stop the marketing bullshit now and focus on what comes with Service Pack 2.
So you said that we start at 7:30 right now?
Yeah. So Service Pack 2, I would like to talk about 5 main topics or 5 features. The first is remote disk encryption management. That's what we lately introduced. Quickly talk about SUSE Connect. I had a separate session on that yesterday, so just 2 slides on that. We're talking about compatibility, something that will help migrating from any environment to an S/4HANA BW on HANA system on Linux. We're talking about the latest high availability resource agents we have for HANA scale-out clusters. That is new. They have been tech preview in the last service pack, and we have them now fully supported. And then we look at the product direction where we want to go next. So remote disk encryption. But first of all, I need your help. Are you using disk encryption somewhere? No? Who is using disk encryption? I use it because it's company policy. Correct. So this is exactly true. When you have a laptop with, for example, that's my Samsung T1 USB drive, everything, my life depends on that thing. Everything is on here, my emails, everything, but it's of course crypted because you can easily lose that. You do not easily use a server. And if you do, you have terribly other problems than that. But there are security requirements to enforce using encryption. It could be the case in certain industries that you have to use encryption. Maybe your security officer is paranoid and asks you to encrypt everything, even on the server. Looking at database vendors, they provide encryption for data volumes. With SAP HANA or Oracle or other databases, you can actually encrypt the data volume. The database takes care of that. So if the data volume is taken away, somewhere else nobody can open it. Look at the cloud. I mean, the cloud is there. You have virtual machines. You have your stuff in the virtual machine. If the virtual machine is taken away, somebody gets in your data center with a USB stick, copies virtual machines. They have full access to the data on the virtual machine. So there are reasons why using encryption is something to consider. But the setup process, and I think I can actually go to the next slide, how is the daily work affected with that? When you have a laptop and you encrypt your stuff, or if you have a USB drive that is encrypted, how does the setup process look like? You plug it in the first time, you enter a password, you encrypt it, you put stuff on it, and then when you use it the next time, when you plug it in, you just type in the password. When you have a boot protection on your laptop with encryption, you boot the laptop, you enter the key, and then everything works fine. But on a server, if there's, for example, a spontaneous reboot, a reboot is happening on 10,000 of servers, that's actually it's a bummer to use encryption there, because what will happen? The services won't be up again because someone has to go there and enter the key. Do that for 10,000 servers. You won't do that for 10,000 servers because at least the time it takes and the disruption of that. And this is one of the main reasons we saw at customer side why they don't use encryption. Although there is a requirement from security saying, okay, please secure that, IT cannot just do it because there are no tools to cope with that. There are commercial offerings helping that, helping with that. And we from SUSE now provide a built-in solution to cope with that, at least to make it easier, at least the security pitfalls. And what we introduced is a Keyserver concept. There are two things. The client here is, of course, not a client like a desktop, but this is a server that can be a server or should be a server. And there's a second server, which is the Keyserver. So the Keyserver is the server that has all the keys stored. And then you have clients which actually ask the Keyserver in order to unlock the volumes. So let's first look on the Keyserver. How would we install the Keyserver? On the command line, that's a SLES for SAP Applications 12 SP2 on the command line. You would need to enter cryptctl init server. You ask for a password. This is the master password of the Keyserver to access it. The next thing is, because between the clients and the Keyserver, we are using TLS, encrypted communication, you either provide your certificate or your certificate chain file, the thing you use in the company already for other TLS encryptions, or you can leave it blank to auto-generate a file. I mean, if you want to just try it out, of course, you just hit blank because you want to see how it works. So in this example, I just hit return so that we can move forward. What's now happening is that a self-signed certificate is generated. It is stored in the directory. We have the key and the certificate. And then a couple of instructions are printed that you should, any client that is there should use this certificate for the communication, should use the host name, because the host name can move between hosts just in case you have a virtual environment. And there's, of course, a man page. The next thing you are asked is the IP address the Keyserver should listen on. Could be that you have more IP addresses. In my example, I'm using all IP address, all network interfaces. You have to provide a port on which the Keyserver listens. The default is 3737, but you can, of course, change that. The Keyserver asks you where you want to store the keys that all the clients send to the Keyserver. By default, it's varlib cryptctl keydb. Of course, you can change that to any location you like. You can, or then you are asked to provide an email server for notifications, because at some point during the process, you would like to know or stay up to date about things that happen on the Keyserver. If a machine reboots, this is locked. There will be notifications on that, all configurable. So you have to provide an email server for that. I don't provide an email server, so the next thing is, if you provide one, you would provide a username and password. Then, of course, it says that settings have been successfully saved, and then you are asked if you want to start the Keyserver. Say yes, and now the Keyserver is running. So this is how it goes. This is it's a small VM, 1 GB, 1 CPU, acting now as a Keyserver. Keyserver is running, listening to port 3737 for connections. So basically, the Keyserver is done. The interesting part is, of course, how the client will look like, because this is the Keyserver you do actually only once. On the client side, you do it more often. So how it looks like is you need to have a directory to encrypt. It can hold already some data, or it can be empty. That is then moved to an encrypted partition. And there has been an update. We don't use 4096-bit random encryption keys anymore, because the operations on disk would be just too slow. The key is too long, that the performance impact is just too big. We now use by default 512-bit keys. That's sufficiently enough nowadays for encrypting the data. Of course, you can manually change it. So the default is 512-bit random key, and then this is then saved to the Keyserver. So how does that look like? Assuming I'm on my client, the first thing I do, I have my self-signed certificate. So I copy that from the Keyserver with secure copy into the directory of the client. The directory I would like to encrypt is /data. And there I have my top secret file. It's currently lying in this directory. And with cryptctl encrypt, the cryptctl encrypt command, I start the process. I need to provide the Keyserver's host name, the port, because that is also a configurable thing, If I want to use encrypted connections, if this is enabled on the key server, and we did that, we give the path to the certificate file. This is the one I copied, etc crypt CTL server TLS hostname.crt. I need to enter the key server's password, the master password for that. And then I have to enter, you see my mouse here, the directory which I would like to encrypt, /data. I need to provide a partition which will be encrypted, which will hold the data later on. I need to provide a number how many computers can unlock this partition remotely. The default is 1 because you want that partition only be unlocked by one machine. Because, for example, you have the fear that if this is a virtual environment, someone else can steal the virtual machine, move it somewhere else, and if it just boots up, automatically it will unlock the partition. So if it's already unlocked, you will get an error. But maybe there's something that this is a directory which is shared among lots of, or this is a partition shared with lots of computers, so you want to have it unlockable by many computers, so you can configure that. Then you configure the heartbeat interval. I put like, I think 15 seconds. So the heartbeat is how the key server is checking if this partition is still unlocked every 15 seconds in my example here. And that's it. So it now asks me a couple of things. I mean, it tells me what it's doing now first. The first step it's doing now, erasing the partition and installs the encryption key on it, the random key. It copies the data from data to the disk, because if the directory is already existing, the data is just copied. And then announce the encrypted disk to the key server. You have to enter yes, and this is then what happens. First, completely erase the disk. So SDA3 in my example has been completely erased. Encryption key has been installed. The data from /data is copied to the disk. And then the key server has been informed that this is now on this particular IP address with this host name, a disk with a certain key has been now set up. Very important to know here, you won't find this set up later on in etcfs tab. So if you look at the etcfs tab, it's empty. What we do here is we have a systemd service that upon boot checks if a disk is available with a certain signature and then asking the key server to unlock it. So you don't see def SDA3, for example, in the etcfs tab. It's not there. And it shouldn't be there because the daemon takes care of that when you reboot, it's mounted automatically. On the key server itself, you will see like this. Now I'm back on the key server. cryptctl list keys. I will see that this certain IP address here, at that point in time, there's a UUID. It has a configured users of max users 1 users or 1 VM is connected, and the mount point is /data. There's much more configuration possible. There are much more configuration possibilities available with cryptctl --help or man cryptctl. You see much of those features. And now you still might ask why. Again, I mean, we talked about that we want to do encryption. Maybe the security folks want to do encryption because from the usability perspective, you have a performance impact and so on. But there are certain scenarios where this is actually something you want to do, because if you're running a hosted system or you're running your system in a cloud, I mean, at some point you trust the cloud provider, you trust the system provider, but they at some point, if a hardware rack fails, they have to erase the disks because your database is still on that disk before they can throw the data, the hard drives away. And if the hard drives are encrypted, they can just throw them away. There are scenarios, for example, where third-party staff is going into a service provider's data center doing maintenance work. And if you are paranoid enough, you don't want, or maybe you have the fear that this service person tampers, because it has access to all the terminals, tampers with the data. So you can actually remotely also unmount your directories. There is, looking again at the database, at a HANA database, HANA can encrypt its own data volumes. So basically you are safe on this side, but HANA cannot encrypt the log volumes. So the log volumes are not encrypted as of today. And you want to have those secured as well. You need to use disk encryption to make them secure. Again, this is not a must-have. there are certain scenarios where this makes sense. There are commercial offerings for that as well. They start with a 5-digit dollar number if you want to purchase licenses from them, or you can use that, which is included in SUSE Linux Enterprise Server Service Pack 2 already.
One question, do we already have when we are encrypting the log file?
Yeah.
For the HANA database, do we have already some performance impact when we are doing that? Support it from SAP?
If you meet the KPIs, yes. Depending on the disk subsystem, how many CPUs you have spare, if the CPUs have those instructions. Today's CPUs have the instruction sets, yes, of course, but it depends on the disk subsystem and, of course, the KPIs. So if you have already been at the limit before encrypting, you might not hit the KPI. If you have some headspace left, probably, but that needs to be tested. But it's not only good for HANA itself. You can have like var log directory encrypted as well. It really depends on your security requirements. But disk encryption nowadays is really something nobody uses because it's so complicated to set up. It's not usability. Security and usability are like two enemies, basically. And I think with that feature, we at least alleviate that a little bit and bring that to a new level on the server side. Coming next to SUSE Connect. I had a session on that yesterday. What SUSE Connect is basically, it's an iTunes app store for SAP third-party software, more or less. SAP has the Integration and Certification Center, the ICC. They have 1,600 partners certified, even more partner solutions certified, partner solutions that do backup, that do monitoring, anything that either works together with an SAP system or integrates. And SAP is certifying all this kind of partner hardware, partner software. But if you go to the web page and you say, okay, I have HANA on Linux, on SUSE, show me what works, this is a search that won't bring any results because SAP doesn't allow you to search for which operating system is certified. SAP is certifying that kind of software, but you don't know if this third-party software is also certified with SUSE Linux, for example. There's a triangle, and currently only 2 of those things are covered. So with SUSE Connect, we went through this list and picked those vendors where we think is a good match for customers, which have, of course, a good feature set in their products, and are also affordable and make sense because there's no need to have, like, if you're saving costs on the operating system level, then you then pay 50,000 bucks for a third-party solution where, I mean, the costs are just not on the same level. So with SUSE Connect, we picked a couple of partners that provide their software like in an app store. To quickly explain that, there's the SUSE Linux operating system. This is it's a very simplified picture. SLES, and you have SAP software on top of that, but this is not what you run in your data center. You have much more. You have auditing software, archiving software, backup software, and so on and so forth. So there's much more software running in your data center. And we picked, as of today, we have 5 partners that we have in the program. And it goes like that. You open the App Store. It's a YAST module. It's on the desktop with Service Pack 2. You click on the icon. It opens up. And then you have a 1-click install. Actually, it's 3 clicks. You have an EULA and a GPG key to accept. But in 3 clicks, you have this software, the partner software installed. Usually, those partner software comes with an arbitrary installer, like their own Java installer or whatever installer they use. The partners delivering their software through our store have an RPM format. We let them know you have to install or provide your software in RPM because this makes lifecycle management of this solution easier when you run Linux. I mean, how to update 10,000 servers when your backup solution is using a Java installer? It's complicated. With RPM, it's easier. And those 5 vendors do that. Second, the solutions they have, you can try those out right away. So there's no need to enter a key or get a license key or give someone a call or so. This software can be used right away. You can try it out. If you like it, contact the vendor, get the key, unlock the full potential of the software. So the benefit is easy to install. You can easily update it. And actually, it's certified for all those partner software certified to run, certified by SAP and certified by SUSE. Centarity is providing business service monitoring. DataVault is providing a HANA monitoring solution. Proterra is actually a cool service they provide. it's some kind of assessment. So you have let's call it, you have any environment, any SAP environment, and SAP tells you, oh, you should go to S/4HANA. And you actually don't know where to start because you have some legacy stuff around, some databases, and so on and so forth. And Proterra provides an assessment service looking at your infrastructure, where your starting point is, and then tells you how long it takes and what else you need. So this is an assessment report they create. Revelation software is in the change management business. So when you have changes, I mean, for auditing and compliance reasons, you need to have everything. Every change you do in the system needs to be documented. They provide a software for that. And SAP is a backup vendor. They also have a booth outside in the technology case area. They back up the operating system and SAP HANA. So that then you have, for example, one tool to back up various technology components. So looking at compatibility, we brought the topic up like a year ago, asking SAP how they envision how their Windows customers are moving to Linux because of HANA. HANA is only available on Linux. For Unix customers, it is okay-ish to move from a Unix to Linux because the trained staff somehow knows how to use a terminal and so on. So this is not that big of a deal. But those Windows customers, although there's PowerShell maybe now, it's a little bit harder for those customers. I'm not saying that it's ultimately hard, but those users, if you're using a Windows environment, are more like used to click things than to use VI or Emacs to configure files. I mean, it's basically the same thing because the Windows stuff also writes the stuff in a file, the Windows UI. It's just a different thing. And this makes it complicated. And SAP didn't have an answer. If you ask SAP, how can I move my Windows environment to S/4HANA? They just talk on the business side of things. Everything below the database, they say, yeah, that's basically your stuff. There's Capgemini and all those other Accenture companies out there helping you. And you say, yeah, well, that's very expensive, so don't you have a better answer for that? And SAP leaves that space open for partners, and we tapped in here. And the compatibility is basically one area where we tap in.
I think with the Azure comment that it will be much easier with Microsoft and HANA, or at least to have a Microsoft piece to it.
You have a Microsoft piece to that. You have management tools that are Microsoft-like, that follow the Microsoft UI paradigm, yes, but it's in the cloud.
But it's all very new. So
it's all new, true.
Really, really new.
True, and some customers embrace those things, and others not. One example, you have Windows customers, and SAP has a lot of customers running their systems on Windows. And now you bring HANA into this environment. And HANA runs on Linux. So this customer, is that customer now saying, oh, my Windows Active Directory, that's so bad, I will move to a Samba implementation on this HANA server because I like Linux? It's not going to happen. They will continue to using their Windows Active Directory for their user management. If they have used that for the last 15 years, they continue to use that. Doesn't matter if you bring HANA on Linux in the data center. That will be the alien. But it shouldn't be the alien. So what we did is with Service Pack 2, we basically started desupporting the WinBind YAST tool, YAST module for connecting to a Windows domain because WinBind honestly is a little bit outdated for that. And we moved to SSSD. So SSSD, it should say new in the brackets. Unfortunately, the presentation wasn't updated, and it was my fault because I submitted too late. We have now a new YAST module using SSSD to connect to an Active Directory. And it's very, very simple. Can you see that? You can join the domain. When you click on Join Domain, the pop-up comes. You give the domain server the administrator password, administrator user, administrator password, and then you can let this server join the Windows domain. It's very simple. What we also did is with SP1, we introduced VNC automatically being started so that Windows administrators or like where your IT staff is outsourced to a low-cost country where the staff is used to using UI can use that. With SP2, we now have XRDP up and running by default. So the standard Windows way of like MSTSC IP address, you now can connect to the Linux server, and then you have the GNOME desktop. That makes it easier when your IT staff isn't trained, because training the IT staff, like, okay, you have to use SSH, and this is a console, and you do everything with the console, that's too complicated. It needs to be easily consumable, and now with XRDP support, we allow customers just to say, okay, install a default SLES for SAP applications, and you can connect with MSTSC IP address, because this is what Windows users are used to. And on the desktop, you have a cheat sheet available, you have all the tools available, help on how to create users or how to join a Windows Active Directory domain, doing this on the server, doing that on the server. It's just helping those customers where they say, okay, how does Linux work? Because there are a lot. I mean, we talked, our president and CTO, they talked about the open sources everywhere, but there are still companies using Windows. It is what it is. And last but not least, with Proterra having their assessment service in SUSE Connect, we also do something for you where you get help from Proterra on a migration assessment. When you are moving from, for example, Windows environment into a Linux environment, they help you with the assessment so that you actually know where you are, what you need, how long it takes, and what it costs. So before moving further with high availability, any one of you using high availability for SAP HANA? Okay. Scale up, scale out systems? Scale out, scale up. Okay, good. So what we provide with the high availability extension is the foundation. We have Pacemaker and all those tools included in the distribution. And with SLES for SAP applications, we add our resource agents on top. So those are the resource agents for failover detection and failover automation. We support three main scenarios with our resource agents. First is SAP NetWeaver scenarios, where we have manual failover, where there's nothing we need to do in a manual failover because you have someone doing the job for you, a human being. We have simple stack and replication combined stack. For scale up, we have a couple of more scenarios, but I would like to talk now on HANA scale out. The slides for NetWeaver and HANA scale up are in the appendix, so we can actually look those up. But I would like to focus on the scale out capabilities because this is what we freshly introduced. This SLES for SAP Applications 12 SP2. We have a comparison table. So the next slides are using this comparison table. We have a couple of scenarios, again, scale out scenarios, auto host failover, manual takeover, performance optimized setup, storage replication, public cloud, and anything else. And we then compare those scenarios, how they do on the cost side, and this is the overall costs. The overall, so this is the cost of software you might have to use, cost of storage. You can imagine that storage replication is a little bit more costly than anything else because you need storage, and you need two of those who replicate data in between. And we look at the downtime, how long the impact of downtime to that, because there are some scenarios which have less downtime, and there are some scenarios which have a larger downtime. Obviously, manual takeover will be the thing with the largest downtime because you have to do all those things manually, moving mount points, moving virtual IP addresses, and so on and so forth. And not to talk about detecting the failover because, yeah, you do everything manually. So first of all is the auto host failover. The scenario we are using in a scale-up environment is basically a cluster of clusters. You have in a scale-out environment, you have a couple of nodes on the left side and a couple of nodes on the right side, left being data center A, right being data center B. You have a couple of nodes, and also those one side of the cluster is already basically a cluster where you have a couple of spare nodes. So this is something like, you can think of that like a RAID system. The green boxes are HANA systems, which are active. And the yellow one is a HANA system that is the spare one for the failover. So we don't have a second side. Again, this is just auto host failover. This happens when a node fails on one side and you or the cluster decides not to do a switch of sides, because the cluster on the left side can still cope with the failure and manage to keep the system up and running given the SLAs that you have configured. So again, it's not a takeover, it's a failover. and it's basically automated by SAP HANA. So SAP HANA can already take care of that. There's not much that SUSE is doing on our side because this is a feature that HANA already provides. Takeover time is very fast. The takeover speed, so there are two things. So takeover reaction time is how fast you detect that there is a failover, that there's an error and you need to do a failover. And the second time is like how long it takes until the failover is complete. And then this setup, the second, or like one of the standby nodes doesn't have the data preloaded, so the data needs to be loaded into memory. But this is done by SAP HANA already. There's not much to do on our side. So this is just looking at one side of a scale-out cluster. So now let us extend that. We had one side. Now we add the second side to that. And because of some failover detection, a failover happens, and your setup that you, in this scenario, have configured as manual failover. Manual failover means you manually detect that there's a failover, whatever you do with that. So if you have a ping running on those servers, that's really up to you. You can do scripting, whatever. So the manual failover is, the good thing is basically the data is already preloaded. So we have already data replication, system replication happening to the second site. Of course, that costs a little bit more because you have a second site running, power is consumed, storage is there, the machines are running. The good thing is you have all of that running, that the failover, the takeover speed is relatively fast because the data is already preloaded. But it costs you a little bit more. The reaction time, again, is variable. Again, you need to have some processes in place to detect that there's a failover. And the failover process, of course, manually, because actually you need to do that, or your administrators need to unmount those file systems, fence the old system, move the IP addresses, mount the file system, and so on and so forth when you have shared file systems. And then it's like, yeah, software's there actually to help you. So why would someone do the manual failover if there's software that can help you with that? And this is actually the performance optimized setup we are having here. And this is the new thing we have now with Service Pack 2. So what we do is, the environment is the same as before. You have two sides. You have an active system replication. Data is replicated. The second side has the data all in memory. But what we have in between is a pacemaker, an active setup, and the pacemaker. So it's then used for basically to trigger then a failover in case a failover happens. Again, the data is preloaded on the second side. The takeover decision is decided by the SUSE, by our scripts that we have, by our SAP HANA SR. I mean, those are files we deliver. You can change those, but the values we pre-deliver are good enough. We have this running at a couple of sites, and the largest customer has, the largest implementation has 19 nodes on each side. So 19 nodes on the left side, 2 gigabytes each, so 38 in total, and 19 servers, 38 gigabytes on the other side in production. Takeover process also completely automated. The takeover reaction time is fast due to pacemaker, and I believe the default is 5 seconds. So the heartbeat interval, I think it's 5 seconds. So very, very fast. And of course, the takeover is fast as well because the data is already preloaded. Storage replication is also possible, but that's completely, basically, where we are not involved. This is something the storage vendors provide. So again, the same situation. You do not do HANA system replication. You do storage technology replication. You replicate the storages over to the other side. There are storage vendors that provide that technology. So no system replication from HANA. You do that over a dedicated storage network between your locations.
The time we preloaded on the other side of
No, no. It's not preloaded. Again, also the takeover decision, again, is something the storage vendor needs to provide because they trigger that. The takeover process as well. So basically, this is just a half-baked. I would call this a half-baked solution because it just takes care that the storage stuff is transferred, but that's it. So this is my realm. I don't look beyond that. I mean, of course, the storage vendors do storage, so they cannot. Basically, it's hard for them to look beyond or provide software that goes into the operating system or into HANA. It's just they just act on a different layer. But this is something that also works, at least from a storage perspective. The reaction time depends on the storage vendor, and of course, the takeover speed is slower because the data needs to be loaded from disk into memory again. So now looking at, I should review my slides more carefully. Let's see a little bit. Just from a cost perspective, auto-host failover is the most cost-efficient thing, but you only do this on one side. It's not happening on the other side, so this is only happening on one side. The manual takeover and performance optimized is a little bit more expensive because, of course, you need SLES for SAP applications to get access to those HANA resource agents. And of course, you have the costs for having the second side up and running all the time. Storage replication is the most expensive one because you need good storage to do that. Whereas the other things can maybe happen on SUSE Enterprise Storage, for example. Public cloud, well, we don't need to do that. And there may be others. There may be other technologies that can be used. But this is just from us, from our perspective, everything that is currently available right now. But in the future, it might change. Maybe there are new players in the market who can do that. Looking at the downtime, of course, manual takeover is the one that takes, it's not the winner here. The automated failover with our pacemaker setup with 5 seconds reaction time maximum and having the data preloaded, a failover happens pretty quickly. Any questions to that? Yes?
Is SAP already supporting that solution, the performance of FUT9 officially with the support?
Yeah, the question was if SAP supports those things, and SAP isn't giving support statements for those HA scenarios. What they do is they have a certification for HA software. So there's an SAP certification for HA software. And our software is certified by SAP. And actually, you have to pay them, and then they certify the software. It is how it is. But the actual setup, I mean, when they don't certify that. It is a little bit different here because when we built the scale-out cluster with the customer, we ran into issues that SAP had to fix HANA because they didn't think about certain models, certain data connection points. They had to implement things. That's why also this is a little bit delayed because we had to wait for the latest HANA release to support those features. It came with SPS 12, or at least the first data point after SPS 12, where HANA was actually capable of running in a scale-out environment. I mean, it ran before, but not in a way that we from our side said this is an actual good HANA HA environment. So SAP at that point, I mean, they are taking care of the database, of the system replication and so on. But like moving a 19-node cluster from one side to the other wasn't on their agenda. So we actually helped them. We pointed out, okay, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be fixed, and this needs to be fixed. And they did it. Because they also see the value of having that kind of system. Because why do we run a scale-out cluster? Maybe your hardware vendor doesn't have 32 terabyte machines. In that scenario, the hardware vendor of that customer provides 2 terabyte machines at maximum. But the business demands much more. So scale-out was the only chance, and scale-out with 19 nodes actually was an appropriate setup for the next 2 to 3 years. So again, SAP isn't certifying that kind of setups. We actually co-developed that setup together with SAP.
We see it as a classic switchover software, like historically we never officially support the switchover software like HACNC and Microsoft Cluster. But that they don't support it, but
It's correct. Yes, yes, yeah. And what we actually, I mean, what now happens is with SAP HANA, SAP takes care of the data replication, which is, I think, a very good idea because they own the data, and only HANA can actually ensure that when you replicate data, the data is securely and atomically arrived at the other side. So this is taken care of by SAP, and I really like that because then they stay in their realm and we stay in our realm where we say, okay, we have an auto failover detection, we can do a telnet, a ping on the services, we see if the services are running, and then we do the movement of the virtual IP address. We move the virtual IP address, we unmount file systems, we do the fencing, and so on and so forth, because this is in our realm, this is the operating system task. So we now have clear responsibility, system replication on SAP side, and we take care of the automation and failover.
So in 11, you're saying the original none of this HA stuff is in 11? If you're doing HA clustering, it's doing about...
No, in 11 we already have that as well, but not the scale out. The scale out in 11 is only tech preview.
So then if you do have scale out with HA in 11, is HANA the one that's unmounting the file system?
No, we have that as well. It's just the support statement from us is different because also the stack in 11 isn't as new as in SLES 12 Service Pack 2. But we can talk about that later. I mean, we can discuss. Because at one point, and this is something, I mean, from product management perspective, I say, why do I only bring features in the latest service pack, especially for SAP customers? Because it may take you 2 years until you are on Service Pack 2. I mean, and we are charging a subscription and not a license business. So it's not like with Photoshop where you need to buy a new license when there's a new software coming out. With a subscription, you have access to all of our products of the SLES line or SLES for SAP Applications line. So actually, I'm in favor of having those features backported into the old service packs because this is what you are running today. But again, it's an effort on our side because the technology stacks are different. I mean, SLES 11 is 7.5 years old, at least GA. I mean, we did service packs, but just from the base foundation. And it's just the benefit that we see here. Everything we do in SP2 will be backported into SP1. Everything we do here will be available in SP1 too. So we already do that. We don't do it until 12 GA because we don't believe that GA release is something that you introduce in your data center. You might want to wait to in Service Pack 1 or 2. And also GA is out of support in 6 months. SLES for SAP Applications. So from that perspective, it doesn't really make sense to go on GA, but to stick on either SP1. But we can have the discussion on SP4. So now talking about the future product direction. We have 4 architects in the SAP Linux lab, and this is a very good source for us to see what SAP is planning next. And those architects are actually the folks that developed also the scale-out solution fully and told SAP what to implement next, at least that the scale-out works for HANA. And when I look at my job and I say, okay, what comes next? It looks like this. We have there's a pile of features that we have. And for me, all of those are very important to be implemented, but not all of those are important for you, for example. We've seen requests for the cryptCTL, and we've already have requests to make this more nicer, to have for the remote disk encryption a UI and videos and a cool documentation around that. Where on the other hand, I say, okay, there's a man page. Isn't the man page enough? No, we have requests to make that a little bit more fancy, and so on and so forth. When we talk about HA, for example, making those setups easier is also on the list. But on the other hand, I say, well, HA environments, you don't want to have those installed out of the box. Because HA is something that you need to architect. It's an environment you architect. You look at the business requirements and translate that. I would love to have like a button where I click and then I say, okay, this is how your HA environment will look like. It's not like that. It's a little bit more complicated. But we are working on that. So what we already have now is that the installation wizard can install an HA environment. So you can either set this is a HANA worker. You install the operating system together with SAP and they say this is the HANA master or this is a HANA worker installation. That is, for example, already working. We do further improvements on the Windows integration as well. I mean, with the XREP is just one of the steps. And we now need to understand how those Windows environments look like. Because if customers follow SAP, they need to place a Linux box in the data center. And there are a lot of Windows customers out there. They have to use Linux. But again, for those customers, Linux is still an alien. Any one of you having only Windows in the data center? Probably not, otherwise you were not here. But this is something we still look into to make it easier to consume Linux. Because if I tell my wife and my daughter to go on the command line, they look at me and what? What? Isn't it available on the iPhone? Isn't there an app? Isn't there an app for that? Isn't there an HA app? But this is the environment we're going in. And this, true, those are servers. Servers are different. Servers is an area for man. That's really tough shit. But times are changing. In 10 years, 20 years, there are new administrators. They work completely differently. And last but not least, there's something not yet announced by SAP, but what we are going to do on our side is that we provide SLES for SAP applications on Power Little Endian. Because SAP is currently, as you might have heard, on Monday on Barcelona Tech Ed, they revealed HANA 2.0. So they didn't do an SP13, maybe because 13 is an unlucky number, I don't know. But instead of having SP13, SAP now revealed SAP HANA 2. And this version will only be available on Little Endian. So SLES 12 is also Little Endian. And we are going to provide SLES for SAP Applications 12 Service Pack 1 on Power as well. Because that will be the platform that SAP certified for HANA 2.0 Little Endian. No, no. The question was if we're going to release a DVD kit. The question is no. There are a couple of reasons why it is, and there's a good reason why it's not really a bad impact or a bad thing. First, the SP1 media is 1 year old. And on one hand, we say, okay, if we just take the original SP1 media, we already know there's a couple of flaws in the software that has been released a year ago. So the only possible way would have been to completely build new images with all the updates that happened since. But that would have meant a complete new testing, which takes us like 3 months. And we decided, as time is valuable here, SAP is releasing HANA 2 on November 30th. And we need to have an operating system by November 30th. Otherwise, see, catch-22. So what we do is we provide online channels. So what you actually do is you take a regular SLES 12 Service Pack 1 DVD, so the SLES 12 Service Pack 1, you install those on the Power servers. And then we have a script. It's available via a TID. You download the script, execute the script on the server, enter the registration key, and then you morph your SLES 12 Service Pack 1 into a SLES for SAP Application 12 Service Pack 1. So you need to have internet access, and then the script takes care that the system is registered, that the etc release is updated, prod files are updated, the channels are registered, and then you have a SLES for SAP application system. And when you have done this can be done on a master system. You can build your own installation media anyway. So with MKSUSE ISO, you find that on GitHub. You can actually take an original ISO file, and then you actually can build your own ISO files out of that, if you have all the packages available. We have hardware vendors doing that. But again, the reason why we don't provide an SP1 ISO, it's horribly outdated, and it would have taken just too much time to test to make that happen. And just considering the timeline, again, it's HANA 2 that has been released. And it's not like that 1 million customers of you say, oh, that's so cool, I instantly used it in production. No, you might want to wait also until SP1 or maybe SP2 is there. And then our Service Pack 2 might be certified or will be certified anyway, for which we then have installation media. So the good news here is that on November 30th, we will have a matching SLES for SAP Applications release also for HANA 2 on Little Endian for all the architectures that are going to be supported. Good. A couple of references. I mean, you have access to those slides anyway. We have 2 job positions open. I mean, this is maybe something you don't see in all of the presentations regularly. So we are looking for an engineering manager for the team. We are expanding. SUSE is expanding. We are hiring lots of people. And one of the former engineering manager was promoted. So we are now looking forward to find someone for the team. And also one of the developer positions is still open. So if you have your son, your daughter, your spouse being able to code and knows SAP pretty well, they are very welcome in the team. There are a couple of other sessions I want to suggest. Later this afternoon, we have a session on live patching. We have a demo when you have live patching allows you to patch the Linux kernel during runtime. We have a demo here where one of our colleagues is preparing an SAP system, is doing tasks in the SAP system while we change the kernel during that time. It's a live demo. It's not like my demo with screenshots. It's a real demo. And then on Thursday, also today, we have the HANA system replication clusters. We have Fabian Herschel, who's the main contributor for our HANA resource agents for the scale out. He has his own session here, either on Wednesday or Thursday. So if you're in the scale up, if you want to know more about scale up, more than what I presented in the 10 minutes, this is an entire session. Lots of technical details how to do that. And Fabian, as the main developer of that, is very, very knowledgeable, and he will be able to answer all of your questions. And the same thing on Thursday, but on AWS. If you want to do that on AWS, or if you're running clusters on AWS, HANA clusters, we have another session here as well. All right. Having said that, any further questions from your side on SLES for SAP Applications 12 Service Pack 2? Anything unclear? If not, you can follow me on Twitter. I tweet about SAP stuff regularly, or LinkedIn. And having said that, thank you for attendance and have a great rest of SUSECON. Thank you.